folks.
I don't think there's much here to this Kafka thing, by the way.
No, it doesn't look like it. It's just more acknowledging there's more conversations going out.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's what the kind of political angle that I'm sure we'll touch on.
Yeah. And of course, we are referring to Metamorphosis, the novel.
Yeah, it is very Kafkaesque.
How much is Kafka?
I'm sure he is thrilled to hear every time he hears it.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're not subscribed to the full audio pre-show version, you just missed an excellent question from Rick Foster.
You just missed out.
About Amazon.
Failure on your part. Boo to you.
Boo this man. All right. So as we got some pretty wordy top stories today, but I feel like we can move through them fairly expediently.
Indeed.
And get to the
can I really quick before we get into the tech news, just read something that delighted me today in the world of politics?
Oh dear.
So Axios.com, which was founded by one of the Politico founders, and I think is exceptional lately.
Ina Fried works over there. She's great.
Who does?
Ina Fried. She left Recode and went to Axios to do tech stuff.
So they're fantastic. There is a great post today by Mike Allen about how Sean Spicer's notebooks could be a Mueller target, investigator. So he goes on to say, when we texted Spicer for comment on his note-taking practices, he replied, "Mike, please stop texting and emailing me unsolicited anymore." When I responded with a question mark, I've known Spicer and his wife for more than a dozen years, he answered, "Not sure what that means. From a legal standpoint, I want to be clear. Do not email me or text me. Should you do again, I will report to the appropriate authorities."
Oh, man.
And then he says at the end, he just works this in with other little notes on it. After an hour of Spicer's text, he replied to a polite email I sent earlier seeking comment. Per my text, please refrain from sending me unsolicited texts and emails. Should you not do, I will contact appropriate legal authorities to address your harassment.
Wow. I mean, it's funny. In my mind, a text message can very easily become harassment, right?
That is
personal. You can hit people more often, whereas an email, it's like, well, I don't have to pay attention to an email.
That is Mike Allen being very petty and making sure that because that kind of stuff happens all the time, right? He is making sure that he embarrasses Sean Spicer by writing his comment 4 times in a row. Hilarious. I was delighted by that.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for tech news? All your tech news is here on Thursday afternoon.
Exactly.
The best Thursday.
Will be done by Florida Georgia Line and Jason Derulo next week.
All right, here we go. You know what Daily Tech News Show is powered by? Not ads. You. To find out more, head to dailytechnewsshow.com/support. This is the Daily Tech News for Thursday, September 21st, 2017. I'm Tom Merritt, and he is Justin Robert Young.
Yes, I am. Hi, everybody. Great to be back on one of my few remaining Sarah Lane-less shows.
It's true. We are but 9 days away. It's the last day of summer, but we have 9 days yet until we hit October. And then there's a weekend in there. And then October 2nd, the new regime kicks in. We got DTNS Labs emails flying. We got plans. We're going to be at LA Podfest, I'm pretty sure. I'm going to be in London on October 9th. All kinds of things are happening, man. It's exciting.
We will be at LA Podfest. And by we, I mean me and the mouse in my pocket.
And Roger Chang. Roger's going
to be there. Good. Roger and the mouse.
If you don't want me there, it's quite easy for me to do.
Believe you me, Roger, I need you there because this mouse doesn't speak English.
Roger's like, I am not a mouse, and I am certainly not in your pocket. Let's start with a few tech things you should know. Equifax posted several times on Twitter directing people to a site mimicking their actual site for checking whether your information had been breached. It was EquifaxSecurity2017.com. They were sending it backwards with security first. They swipe 2 words. The site that they were sending people to is being described as a phishing site. It was not a phishing site, although it very easily could have been. It was set up by Nick Sweeting to illustrate the risks of not making the domain name for things like this part of the Equifax main site so that nobody can typo squat or inversion squat like he did. He did not collect any information on you. There was no actual risk. It was just embarrassing to Equifax.
I said this last week. I almost didn't put in my information because it looked like a phishing site, while my wife was telling me over and over and over again about how I needed to do this to make sure that I was part of the breach.
And that was the real one.
Yeah, for which, by the way, I still have no confidence that I was part of the breach because of problems with that. But, oh boy, Equifax, come on, man. At some point, they're going to stop tripping over their own pants and landing in a plate of pie cream and then have and march over them a Naked Gun style. But today is not that day.
It's not funny anymore.
Speaking of not funny, That's Not Funny has a trusted source who tells them that Roku will introduce a 4K HDR streaming stick later this year.
Getting into the Chromecast Ultra game. I see. No idea on price or anything, right? Just the leak. And Facebook said Thursday it will share with the U.S. Congress information relating to 3,000 ads it claims were run by organizations in Russia around the time of the U.S. presidential election. Facebook previously shared the information with Special Counsel Robert Mueller, but it is now sharing it more widely, which it says it doesn't do lightly.
Yeah, this is always a very, very interesting topic because Congress, bless their hearts, oftentimes like to talk about things that are popular. So they might get in front of television cameras. Just go ahead and look at their very important work on steroids in baseball. If you,
I've seen Veep.
Yeah,
I know how this works.
So I don't know exactly what this means.
Here are some more top stories. Google has paid $1.1 billion to HTC, but for what? Actually, I give the tech press credit. Almost every story I've read about this has been accurate and very clear, but it's still confusing to a lot of people. Google is buying 2,000 hardware designers, or the division that employs 2,000 hardware designers, from HTC's white label hardware design division. Google also gets some non-exclusive licenses to some HTC intellectual property. So they're not buying the intellectual property. They're not buying patents like they did with Motorola. They're just getting a license to say, hey, if we have your designers now working for us, they'll need to take advantage of some of this stuff. The employees who are in Taiwan are currently part of the Powered by HTC division that works on stuff for other companies, the non-HTC products, like, for instance, the Google Pixel. So they'll remain there, but they'll become Google employees, and HTC will continue to make its own hardware. In fact, HTC even indicated it will make a successor to the U11. So HTC not selling its handset division. This is not Nokia. This is not Motorola.
Yeah.
They are simply taking kind of the, there's the part of the pork and beans plant that makes the brand name pork and beans, and there's the part that makes your grocery store brand. They're selling off the part that makes the grocery store brand, giving it to Google.
Which shows you exactly how desperate HTC is, right? Because
they need the cash.
Yeah, theoretically, they would like to say, no. You don't get the one thing that you really like. You need to take everything. We are selling this company, and you have to figure out exactly how you use what you buy. This is not the case. Again, they seem to have learned their lesson from Nokia and Motorola, and they are saying, how about this? We'll overpay for exactly what we want. You get cash and a new lease on life for whatever it counts for, and we get exactly what we want, the people that are already working on our phones.
Yeah. So, and Google was the biggest client of this division anyway. So what they're saying essentially is we want to focus on Vive. We'll probably still be involved in the Google Pixel somehow, right?
Yeah.
Because HTC is keeping its manufacturing. Google's just going to design this thing in-house from start to bottom. They already were designing the Pixel in-house in a lot more ways than they had been. But now this will be entirely their design, which means they wouldn't have to use HTC. They could go to Foxconn or anybody else to build this thing. They don't need HTC's involvement now. But my guess is there's a little bit of an understanding here that they'll somehow send some business back HTC's way. So this is perfect for Google. Google beefs up the team that Rick Osterloh is running that has been designing the Pixel with 2,000 experienced employees. They can also start designing other things, don't forget. Besides just handsets, they can also maybe design some tablets and some laptops and maybe even some VR stuff, right?
Yeah.
The experience of 2,000 employees runs wide. Meanwhile, HTC doesn't lose the ability to make anything itself.
Bose announced a new version of its noise-canceling headphones, the QC35-2. Just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? Now, a dedicated button for Google Assistant. The headphones use Bluetooth to connect to a Google Assistant app on Android or iOS. The headphones can read messages, play music, news, and make phone calls. The Q335-2 is available now in the US, Australia, Canada, Germany, France, and the UK for $349.95. Tom, word association, noise-canceling headphones. What comes to mind first?
Airplane.
What is spotty to completely non-existent on an airplane?
Wi-Fi. Also, food service, but Wi-Fi mostly.
Sure, yeah. Among the many things like leg room and
right.
quiet and an absence of anxiety for some flyers. But yeah, no, Wi-Fi. I guess that's the biggest thing that like I can understand a headphone, and maybe this is what is special about this, a headphone that is more designed to work with assistants. Be they, this is Google Assistant, but I'm sure we'll see some with all the other versions, right? But at the same time, the noise canceling element of it, if that's the other big selling point, they seem like two different things, not necessarily flavors that pair well together, at least at first blush for me.
Well, the big news here is Google Assistant got a big name on board, right? We've been getting barraged with Amazon Voice Services is on this refrigerator and that tablet and everywhere. And Google Assistant finally is like, hey, we're on Bose, big name. But yeah, when you dig past that part of the announcement, it is a little interesting to think of noise canceling headphones. I am sure people listen to them at home because they just provide great sound, and maybe they live in an urban environment that has a lot of noise outside and they just want some peace and quiet. Feedback at dailytechnewsshow.com. If you listen to any noise canceling headphones, I don't care if it's Bose or otherwise, outside of an airplane, and tell us why. We're very curious to hear what those situations are.
Yeah, I can't think of it personally, but go ahead and let us know.
I'm imagining the old Maxell. Was it the Maxell ads where the guy's sitting in the chair and the sound is rushing past him?
Yeah.
Right? When you're like, I don't need that much wind in my face. I'll just wear the noise canceling.
I'll wear the noise canceling headphones.
I could see it if you were like on a ship, like on a Navy ship where you have to share racks and with a bunch of other people you want to. But the Google Assistant wouldn't be very useful.
I was going to say, yeah.
That doesn't provide more Google.
I think that's the thing is like, it's not like noise canceling headphones for new technology. This thing has been around forever.
Cisco's Talos Security announced Wednesday that its analysis of the CCleaner software infection shows that the attackers intended to use the resulting botnet to target 18 tech firms, including Intel, Google, Microsoft, Akamai, Samsung, Sony, VMware, HTC, Linksys, D-Link, and Cisco itself. The attackers successfully implanted another piece of malware on machines in 8 of those companies, at least 8 that Talos knows of. Talos recommends companies fully restore any machine that had the infected version of CCleaner installed on it. In fact, they say restore it to a backup prior to the installation of the infected version of CCleaner. And of course, anybody who installed CCleaner during that period should make sure they have the most recent version of CCleaner to get rid of this thing. But before, it was just like, get rid of CCleaner's infected version, you should be fine. Now it looks like, well, in some cases, if you're part of a target company, it looks like they were trying to put some other malware in. And this has gone from being, spammers run botnets, what are you going to do, to an advanced persistent threat looking approach, which is usually a nation state, certainly a sophisticated attacker.
Yeah. And
so we're talking cyber espionage.
Look at that murderer's row of people affected, right? That is pretty much every billboard you could possibly see coming into San Francisco. Basically.
Yes, except for the small startups. They're not big enough to be on here.
No. And those are all gone to weed dispensaries now, making it real local. The 20s in
20 not THC.
Stop it. Oh, will you stop? In 2016, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission discovered attackers exploited a vulnerability in a test filing feature to gain access to non-public information. The SEC quickly patched the vulnerability and does not believe personal information was accessed. Phew. However, it has now come to light that the attackers may have used what information on companies they did access to make illegal trades. A July GAO report found that the SEC does not always fully encrypt sensitive information, uses unsupported software, has failed to fully implement an intrusion detection system, and made missteps in how it configured its firewalls. Tom, we talked about this one earlier, and you read that first half, and you're like, hey, you want to know what? Good on the SEC. And then you get the final report card, and you're like, sorry, buddy, we got a real problem here.
Yeah. No, they come off looking fairly decent in the 2016 vulnerability where they were on it quick. And the only thing that happened that made them bring it to light was the fact that turns out they may have used some of the information they did get, which wasn't particularly sensitive, but it allowed them to make some insider trades. So we need to make sure that people understand that. But that July GAO report, which I missed, came out in July. I didn't see anything about it, is just damning, saying like, no, they are not doing a good job over there. So it's less about this attack and more about the fact that it looks like another attack could be quite likely if this GAO report is correct.
They need to get their ducks in a row, because this is the kind of stuff that when you talk about real disruption, the SEC is one of those organizations that should be a watchdog over it.
Now, when you're talking about the SEC, I suppose you say they need to get their docs in a row.
Oh, yeah. And they also, we are talking about the SEC here, so roll tide.
BGR has an interesting overview of what security researchers have been saying about Apple's Face ID. So a lot of people have a lot of opinions about it. And there's some questions about the usability and whether it's training people or over-promising, and those are all fair. But what do the people who actually live and breathe security say? Well, they talked to a couple of them. Troy Hunt, who I have some respect for. He does great work. Told BGR he thinks it's about the same as Touch ID, and he would be surprised if any easily exploitable risks were found. He's not saying there won't be risks. There are risks with Touch ID, but Touch ID's risks are not easily exploitable. Mark Rogers, who's head of InfoSec at Cloudflare, says that, well, the positives with Face ID are that it learns your face with machine learning, so it'll have fewer false positives and false negatives. It stores all the data on the device, not in the cloud, which that means Apple doesn't get their hands on it. Users' eye detection to prevent being fooled by a model or picture, and has the 5-button press fail-safe to turn it off if you're afraid of somebody grabbing it and trying to force you to unlock it. Okay, those are the positives. For negatives, though, Rogers says it might be awkward to use, and that's a negative not just because it's awkward to use, because if it's awkward to use, people might not use it. And if Face ID is your only option other than a passcode, some people may just not do either. He said Touch ID was so easy to use that a lot of people who never used passcodes finally set one up because they wanted to use Touch ID. So he's worried about that. Also, Apple didn't do it to improve security. They did it because they couldn't fit Touch ID on a bezel-less screen. It's like that's a bad motivation. So this isn't an advance. This is at best equivalent. And the 5-button press is untested in court. You could be sued for using the 5-button press. He's like, we don't know, that needs to be tested. And it's untested for high security activities like banking and password managers. He's like, we need to get these things in our hands and run it through the rigmarole before I could say it's safe to use. Rogers recommends using a complex password until those tests are carried out.
All that being said, that is still the most responsible way you can phrase about as good of a initial report as you can from these kinds of security researchers, because everything that they have said as a liability is a possible liability that they will not know until they get their hands on it. Now, obviously, once people get their hands on it, we're going to find out exactly how much the rubber meets the road on this. But Touch ID was not universally super easy on in its first implementation and failed very, 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 very often, to the point where if I were less patient, and I am not an intensely patient person, then I might have turned it off. It now, ironically, well, not ironically, but you know, because you would expect it to, on my iPhone 7 Plus, works almost flawlessly. It is fantastic, specifically with the new iOS. I would be the one thing I would push back on that is, yes, and it is there because they couldn't fit a Touch ID on a bezel-less screen, and I guess they made the decision that they didn't want to put it on the back like some of the other phones have done with fingerprint IDs.
And I love it on the back. I use it on the 5X and the Essential, and it's great. In especially the Essential, you know, it has some other problems with it, but that fingerprint sensor is pretty spot on. It works very well.
I will say, I think that part of the motivation might not have just been, we don't want to do that, but also to show off and flex the muscle of the chipset that they have inside this phone and how much on-phone machine learning that they can do. It's why they're pushing AR. It's why they're looking at, you know, why they can power the kind of technology they need to make Face ID a reality. So I do think that it is also because, not because they didn't want to do something else, but because they could do something with this new, like, incredibly beefy and muscular chipset.
Hey, folks, if you want to get all the tech headlines each day in about 5 minutes, subscribe to Daily Tech Headlines at dailytechheadlines.com, available as a podcast. I want to repeat our apologies from yesterday. The Amazon Echo flash briefing of this has some technical problems right now, and we are working with Amazon to figure them out. No, I don't have any clue when they'll be figured out, because we're waiting for Amazon to tell us what's actually wrong. Because from our side, it looks like everything's okay, but obviously it's not. So hopefully that will be restored as soon as possible. Dan and Alex are working like crazy to get that fixed. So big props to them for working through this. But apologies for that. Hopefully that'll be back soon. In the meantime, you can get it as a podcast or on the Anchor app at anchor.fm. All right. Last week on September 12th, BuzzFeed editor-in-chief Ben Smith wrote an article titled "There's Blood in the Water in Silicon Valley." And in fact, just before we did the show, there was a Recode podcast with Peter Kafka talking to the New York Times' Jim Ruttenberg about essentially the same thing, saying that the government is on all sides of the issue, from right to left to center, is starting to turn against the big tech companies and say, you guys need to do what we say, because it's popular, because people are starting to feel negative emotions toward these big companies. On September 19th, The Guardian published an excerpt from a book by Franklin Foer called "Facebook's War on Free Will." And it is a long and very interesting investigation into what Facebook is really doing, how it proposes that it's bringing us all together and helping a more transparent world, but that it's actually allowing us to surrender ourselves to the algorithm and subtly making us do what Facebook wants. I think that is just an example of what we were talking about in the first, which is people are no longer looking at little Google and its two engineers from Stanford working in their garage. They're no longer looking at this genius boy from Harvard who created this social network. They're looking at Standard Oil. They're looking at big trusts and saying these companies are too large and have too much power. When I floated this topic to folks in our analyst Slack, a lot of them said, yeah, it's tech companies, not tech. People still love their tech, and there's lots of interesting tech out there. So Justin, I have a thought about what I think is one of the danger signs right now, because we've gone through this before, right? Microsoft was scrappy, and so was all the little companies of the 80s like DEC, and then eventually it shook out and Microsoft became big. But when Microsoft became big, we eventually got our Googles and our Amazons and our Facebooks, and now that they've got big, where do we go from there?
Two things are at play here. Number one, you have ubiquity. The fact that these are companies that are no longer the things that your nerd friend tells your jock friend, right? Everybody knows what Google is. Everybody knows what Facebook is. Everybody knows what Apple is. These are not companies that are niche. Apple is the, trading, depending on what the market has done that day, can very often times be the number one most profitable company in the world, outpacing oil, which I don't know if people have noticed is a fairly popular product.
Yeah, fairly profitable too.
Profitable as well. What we have now, all right, so there's two things. Number one, you have public perception of tech companies shifting to not necessarily being, oh, wow, what wizardry has come from the West, but rather, why did this not work? Why did this tech make my life worse? Am I being dumbed down by these technologies because they are trying to do things for me? Or at its most insidious, are you trying to run me out of a job? Are you trying to make sure that I never work again? Because it's going to be 5% more efficient on some larger global scale. And this, I don't want to get into it, but this also goes into a lot of kind of baseline fears that we have seen manifest politically, both here and abroad. Beyond that, politicians will do what gets them reelected. If there is baseline fear or baseline anxiety about not tech necessarily, but the decisions of tech companies and the power of tech companies, they will pounce on it. I expected it to happen in the 2016 election when, Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton were taking kind of veiled positions on either side of the Uber worker designation, whether or not they should be employees. And then, as we all found out, the election wound up becoming about many, many other things. But I think that time is up. For Silicon Valley, the time is up. Your time is now in terms of being in the hot seat with the political world.
Yeah, and I kind of go back and forth in my head about why didn't this happen before? Why didn't this happen with Microsoft and HP? And I've got a couple of answers. Stoic Squirrel in our chat room actually gave two really good emblematic examples. One is Juicero. Juicero sold you a product you didn't need for a lot of money under the veil of being a startup. And if you didn't hear about Juicero, we didn't cover it on Daily Tech News Show because it wasn't tech. It was, here's a device that will cause juice to come out of these packets that we will sell you for a lot of money. Didn't make any sense at all. But it tried to be like, oh, we're innovative. Like it played the hype to the end. So I think there's a little bit of, I've been burned by being overpromised. Now, Juicero is at one extreme end of that, but even buying a phone, sometimes it promises like, oh, this will change your life. It'll do everything for you. And then the first time your voice assistant is like, I don't know, here's a web search, or it locks up. Or an app crashes, people go, well, wait a minute, this isn't what I was promised. This isn't the hopeful new world. And the other example he gave was Bodega, which we actually talked about earlier on your Twitch stream. Yeah. It's a company that, was providing a service, a vending machine. It was hooking up an app to it, fairly uncontroversial, but tapped into what you were talking about anxieties about job replacement and automation, and just kind of didn't really provide any innovation, right? I mean, they were just using the tools that are laying around to make something interesting, and that can be very valuable. I'm not going to diss them on that, but they called it Bodega, which made New York people think that was a store, and it tied into all that anxiety, right?
If it were called the glass box and it did exactly what it would do, it would grow at whatever trajectory it would grow at, and then it would figure out that stocking all these boxes is probably really annoying, and maybe their tracking service is not exactly what they thought it was going to be, and they would either succeed or fail by doing the fairly low margin work of trying to bring essentials to various boxes that are in your apartment or place of work or co-working space, right? It is an uncontroversial company, and yet it called itself Bodega. And what we found very, very quickly is that all it took was a Fast Company headline to say, tech bros want to run your bodega out of business, which, I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about their company on how much bravado they wanted to use about disrupting and hashtag,
sure,
or whatever. But the narrative is there.
Yeah.
It only took the slight pinprick of a acerbically worded Fast Company article to set Twitter and social media ablaze. If you knew somebody from New York who, we get it, they have egg sandwiches at bodegas. I'm not, I understand.
Yeah, it'd be like Amazon coming out with mom and pop.
No, it wasn't. Yeah, it wasn't. It wasn't. If Amazon was like, look, we are deciding to target bodegas in New York City, and we are buying aggressively real estate next to them, and we are going to use Amazon's price advantage to make sure that we run them out of business so we can turn their shop into an Amazon Echo display room. That would be something to say, oh my God, they are going to run these people out of their jobs. However, I can understand the anxiety that, sure, this is how it starts. It starts with just two guys with their dumb glass boxes that probably aren't even in New York all that much.
And a lot of it has to do with naming, right? These days, this is a culture where you say the wrong word and people erupt, and they said the wrong word for sure.
And the weird thing is, they called it a bodega, and most of their stuff, their places are in California where nobody knows what a bodega is.
I know. Maybe they thought they could sneak under the radar that way. Too many bi-coastal people, too many New Yorkers transplanted to the West Coast, unfortunately.
Exactly. And now, and then all of a sudden you have the viral videos from Me Too and Jesus and Mero,
So these are just recent examples, right? These are things that'll flame out. We'll forget about this in years, but this has been going on for a little while. There, you mentioned Uber. Uber has been a target, and it's not the only one.
As well, Airbnb got put their face in the buzzsaw on this.
So here's one of the things I've noticed, and I'm not sure how this ties in. Instead of computer power growing while prices fall, which while Microsoft had become the big evil monopoly in the 90s, you still had computer power growing while prices fell. We now are starting to see computer power growth slowing. It's taking a little, Intel's off the TikTok cycle, right? And it's, RAM's still pretty cheap, but there are some parts that just aren't declining in price. So prices for things like phones are rising. That's a different dynamic. And it's one thing to say like, well, I don't like Microsoft, but wow, I could still get a much better laptop for the less than I paid for my last one. I can't complain too much about that.
I want to push back on the phone thing though. The flagship phones prices are rising. But
sure.
It is cheaper to get a phone that has better functionality now than it was 5 years ago.
But my point remains that in the past, your high-end laptop price went down. The top-end laptop from HP was generally cheaper than the top-end laptop from HP had been the last cycle. And tech progress in the parts has been slowing. So we are seeing the top end. I think the top end is just the leading indicator. If this continues, we'll start to see a pile up, right? Where the mid-range phones will start to not be as cheap as they were the last time. It's not the overall price. It's the fact that, oh, wait, I have to pay more to stay at the same level or, to get the next best thing at the next level. I'm used to paying less. And I think that plays into all of this.
I agree, kind of. Here's where I disagree. I don't think that most people understand this, and this might be a root cause, but ultimately, the fact that YouTube and Facebook can internally change their algorithms and change the fortunes of politicians, businesses, entertainers, music, culture, that weirds people out.
It's all there. And it's they're too big is what it boils down to, right? They have too much power. They have too much influence.
And we don't know, specifically when you've got Mark Zuckerberg out here shaking hands and kissing babies, whether or not he is going to run for president in the next cycle. There is this fear that we are losing control of how our culture works. It all changed so fast. And now, if part of the reason why Donald Trump is the president is because his team knew more about where his followers were because they had access to his Facebook data, then is Mark Zuckerberg is it fait accompli?
And let's point out, people were saying the same thing about President Obama's victories. He had more data. He crunched the data better.
And he was the tech president, right? He got celebrated for that, whether or not it panned out. So now, if Mark Zuckerberg wants to run, do we have a choice, or has that horse already left the stable? And there is, to me, that is the defining anxiety of our age: is, did the world get away from us?
And honestly,
have here move away, and will it ever come back?
I'm trying to decide if this is just the period where Microsoft seemed unassailable, and we're waiting for our Googles and eBays and Facebooks to arrive. Is the next wave of disruption right around the corner, or is this Standard Oil? And the problem with Standard Oil was that they kept innovation from happening around them. The reason that Trust Busters picked up and got momentum was that Standard Oil was perceived, and other trusts like it, as keeping people from competing with it and changing it and innovating around it. And those are modern terms used to describe a historical fact, but that was kind of the idea: is you have too much power, we need to limit you, we need to bust you up. Whereas Microsoft, people talked about breaking up Microsoft. It was seriously bandied about as a proposal, and then suddenly the innovations happened, and Microsoft looked like it was on the ropes, and you didn't need to talk about that anymore.
Well, no, a judge ruled to break up Microsoft, right? And then it was overturned. Like that's how close it came. Let me pitch this. Beyond whether or not anything needs to be broken up, because I think politicians are going to investigate what they're going to investigate.
Oh, yeah. Amazon is going to get that push against it.
Amazon will get that push. Is our anxiety about this our natural antibody to it happening? Is the fact that we are worried that YouTube and Facebook and Twitter control too much of how our culture runs, and we are anxious and we're writing our angry essays, that if Mark Zuckerberg comes out, doesn't matter how much he knows who to talk to and who not to talk to based on Facebook data, he will have a baseline distrust because we trust him and the amount of data that he has on us, and that will hamper what he does. Is that just the natural order of things, that we are turning against that concept so it does not turn against us?
The only question is how we turn about it and how fast. History has proven that, yes, that is what happened, whether it's the people throwing their sabots into the machines,
the original sabotage.
Yeah. Or getting into trust busting, or just innovating, right? I mean, you didn't need to break up Microsoft, it turned out, because enough innovation was happening and people turned to that and said, well, I'm going to use this free Google Drive thing that this cool little search engine has created. I'm going to use this Gmail thing. That's pretty interesting. So is that wave coming? If you have thoughts about where that wave's coming from, let us know. feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. Could be coming from machine learning. Maybe there's a little startup out there that's going to just turn everything upside down. Could be coming from mesh networking. Could be coming from the blockchain. There's lots of regions it could come out of, but there's no obvious standard bearer for that. Or is it going to have to be trust busting? Or is it going to have to be throwing the wooden shoes, and something more dramatic?
And by the way, if we think this is bad right now, we've already had, carve-outs in federal legislation for truck drivers to not allow self-driving trucks be part of that self-driving legislation. Wait until we continue to see the tech on a rapid scale start putting people out of work, and that will only continue to exacerbate this situation.
And I have maintained that in the long run, in the mid-range run, jobs don't go away, because we decide what jobs are, and wealth doesn't go away. It either gets concentrated or passed around. That's the problem. It won't disappear. But in the short term, if it happens really fast, it can cause some major disruption, and it can cause major wars.
And look, it was something that I cheered like an Ewok at the end of Return of the Jedi when Uber and Lyft disrupted the taxi industry because I was so frustrated with every experience that I had. It would be less exciting for me if they started doing podcasts and political talk shows that they could do better than me.
From machine learning, right? That just is like, wow.
And they modulated exactly my tone of voice, and they could do it better, and it could be 24 hours. I would be very frustrated.
Well, folks, we like talking about this kind of thing. Thanks to everybody who suggests topics for us in all the different places you can do so, like our subreddit at dailytechnewsshow.reddit.com, our Facebook group at facebook.com/groups/dailytechnewsshow. Real quickly, I want to remind folks who have enjoyed the After On podcast that I also host with Rob Reed that there's a new episode out where Rob talks to James Barrett about the dangers of superintelligence. A lot of topics that cross right over to what Justin and I were talking about. Is AI bad? Is it going to get out of control? James Barrett has one perspective, and it's a perspective that informed Rob's book, After On. You can find that at after-on.com. Also, we got a pick from a listener who says they have a wide range of tech-centric podcasts with heavy focus on GNU Linux at jupiterbroadcasting.com. Linux Action News is very much like DTNS, but only once a week and all about Linux. So not that much, but I get the format is the same. They have Linux Unplugged, which is a longer form discussion show about a handful of topics relating to Linux and the free and open source community in general. They really love Linux and even use only Linux computers for their production. It's pretty damn cool. I hope the other GNU Linux enthusiasts that listen to DTNS also like Jupiter Broadcasting as much as I do. And then David from sunny and cool Minnesota was thinking about what we were saying yesterday on the show about the Overwatch League and says, I think you guys were onto something. What I think we'll see is official team skins in the game for the actual teams, so you will know if you're cheering for the right tracer. Cheers, mate. But then the fans of those teams can buy skins for their characters. They won't be exactly the same skins, but they'll have the team colors and the logos, and revenue generated by those purchases would be split between the teams and Blizzard to help with funding the league and paying for stuff and generating income for teams. Anyway, just one of my random thoughts for the day. Thank you, David, for that.
I am excited. For whatever reason, I have a real interest in the Overwatch League where I do not play Overwatch, but I would like to go see a live game for the San Francisco team.
Well, they're going to be kicking off the preseason down here in LA at the Blizzard Arena in Burbank, California. There's also a Hearthstone tournament happening there in October. We'll talk. Thank you, Justin. Robert Young, of course, for joining us. Lots of other cool stuff that Justin is doing out there. What is but one that you can tell folks about?
Well, if you enjoyed us kind of dancing around the political arena, then you can go ahead and check out my podcast, Politics. We did a couple cool things this week, not only the normal episode, but also we have a little book club. If you like reading about campaigns, I love campaign books. And so I'm reading them. And we have the Campaign Chaos Book Club. We just posted our episode about Devil's Bargain, about Steve Bannon's relationship with Donald Trump throughout and before 2016. And now we are reading the Hill Dog's book herself, What Happened? And we will do our review of that as soon as I am done. So if you want to go ahead and read Hillary Clinton's book, What Happened, then check that out and listen to Politics. So you know when the wrap-up episode is coming.
Huge thanks to everybody who supports this show at patreon.com/DTNS. You have made it possible for us to do some amazing, cool new things, bringing Sarah Lane on the show, doing experimental episodes as part of DTNS Labs, and a final Friday monthly roundtable. If you'd like to see us do that roundtable more often and you haven't backed the show yet, that's the next milestone, is to increase the frequency. And Londoners, Monday, October 9th, I'll be in London for a meetup and live recording of the show with Mr. Will Harris. I think Ian from Text Messages is probably going to show up. You can get all the details and sign up to attend at bit.ly/DTNS London. Our email address is feedback@dailytechnewsshow.com. We're live Monday through Friday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 2030 UTC at alphageekradio.com and diamondclub.tv. Our website is dailytechnewsshow.com, and we'll be back tomorrow with special guest Keith Townsend to talk about how hard it is for IT people to keep secure with my special co-host, Sarah Lane. Talk to you tomorrow.
This show is part of the Frog Pants Network. Get more at frogpants.com.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
It's a good combo.
Yeah.
That was interesting.
Man, it's a hard one to talk about because
the problem, the way I see it, and not with your discussion, but like the situation is, it's layered in such a way that so many things that people would attribute to tech are, I think, indicative of a larger, issue. For example, with like globalization, or the ability of parties to kind of micro-target specific, at least in the U.S., districts for gerrymandering, right? So you have all these things that people just kind of feel have a huge anxiety about, and they're lashing out the biggest fish that they can, that they can see in front of them, as they see as kind of being the standard bearer for all these other things.
You mean
coming
a
down
fish
the pipe.
called Equifax?
Ooh, wait, who put that in?
Beatmaster.
Wait, he didn't just type fish, did he?
He typed PHISH.
Oh, I didn't even see that. That's like weird. The biggest fish.
I didn't want to get into it too explicitly, but I do think that there is this idea that the fear of globalization is just real right now, and the idea that our lives are going to be changed by people that are far away from us and we can't talk to is something that is both on the micro and the macro, enough to make your brow sweat.
I mean, actually knowing, extended family members who are in that situation where their jobs were going to be basically offshored or basically contracted out to another organization. I mean, I think for a lot of people, it becomes less of an academic issue and more of a like, oh crap, what am I going to do to pay my mortgage, to feed my kids?
Sure, but most people aren't in that situation and are still afraid.
Well, so do you know what the elephant curve is?
It's the one that starts with the tail and then goes up and then is level and then pops back down and goes up like an elephant.
Yes. Hey, that's really good. I mean, so you've seen it, right?
Yeah.
So the part where it dips, so the theory behind that is if you take the aggregate, I guess what's standard of living or income, wages, they've gone up for everyone from the bottom up to like the 60% mark, and then from like the 60 to the 80%, it actually hasn't moved. In some cases, it's dropped, and everyone on the 90 plus side also see a boost. So really, everyone's going up except for that 15% near the top, which is what we would consider to be in the middle class arena of most developed countries. And so their wages have been stagnant while they see everyone else's going up. So, the feeling would be is like, hey, I'm falling behind. Everyone else is moving on up.
Even though they're not, it's a perception. Yeah.
No,
it's
not
a real perception. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's also the idea that Silicon Valley connotes a cold, bottom line kind of idea, much in the same way that I think, there's baseline fears about banking and stuff like that, anything like corporate rating, that that instead of it being, braggadocious, greed is good, traders and corporate raiders and the new boss that comes in and cuts your job because, it can save 5 cents. That Silicon Valley has a similar, maybe, not in the flourishes, but a cold, hey, well, if you don't do this, then you shouldn't be doing this. You'd be happier painting. Why aren't you on Etsy instead of doing your job? Don't worry, we'll take care of you. You can just monetize on our platform. Oh, wait a minute. Also, you're not ad friendly. Sorry, we couldn't monetize you, but I'm sure there's other places that you can do what you do. That it's like you don't get a say. You're going to be put into their silos. The bigger their silos get, and they don't care about you.
Yeah, I think a lot of the exposure of tech's bugginess to the wider populace is another contributing factor. And I think that's why this is so hard to figure out for a lot of people is there isn't just one reason. It's not just the economy. It's not just looming automation. It's not just outsourcing. It's all of these things kind of in a perfect storm. And just the fact that I don't know how this tech works, and it's got so much of my important information, and it's buggy, and it crashes, and I don't understand it, and then I read that people can hack in and get all my information, and I don't know what the real risks are, and I'm scared. I'm scared of these companies having so much control over my life in a way that I don't understand.
Or enabled to influence, right? Like I don't know what to do. Like I can't just go into their computers and punch up a bunch of things to make myself all safe and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think I'm wondering if this is also kind of bridging the whole generational gap where people who are comfortable and enthusiastic about embracing technology versus people who are just like, they're users of technology, but more out of necessity than any kind of like, ooh, I'm a geek, I'm a technophile, or I want to learn about technology. More like, it's technology as a tool.
Well, I think the other thing that's huge is that with the advent of the smartphone, where we were now able to take a significant amount of computing and internet connectivity with us all over the place, it spread out what technological companies were, right? Like initially it was all about things you do on your computer or ways to sell you a better, faster computer. And then the phone happened. And now it's Airbnb on a level that you would never have it before. It's Uber on a level that you would never have it before. Now tech disruption comes to everything. And that's another thing where it's like, wow, this isn't just, again, it's like, it is the breakout from everybody used to come to me and ask me, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about this tech thing? Are you going to get the new iPhone? I don't know. Only nerds get the computer thing. And now it's everywhere. You don't understand it, and it might take your job. More at 11.
Yeah. I think, too, there is something to the fact that so much money can be made on the existing technology that a lot of companies aren't spending time trying to come up with new technology. I just thought of this second, so it may be absolutely way off base. But if I'm doing a startup, looking at an app, right? Like, what's a service I can provide? What can I do with my code that'll make this app platform work for me? Which means disruption of those existing companies is less likely because it mostly takes a really good new piece of technology to fully disrupt. Now, two of our biggest examples are counter to that. Facebook didn't use new technology. It just used the existing Web 2.0 platform to create something interesting. Same for Google. They just used the .com era stuff, but they came up with a way better algorithm. So maybe I'm off base. Maybe all you need is software for that. But I don't see as much investment in exploring new technology the way Wozniak did with Apple II or the way Apple did with the iPod.
Let me also point this out.
In my mind, I was thinking of two different companies when I said that, and I just realized those were both examples from Apple.
Let me pitch this. Whenever
I know Tom has a heart out, so
yes. Oh, I already picked the title. It's Down with Tech.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Whenever anybody writes a San Francisco trend piece over the last 5 years, what is an out-of-towner because they're here for the World Series or they're here for the Super Bowl or they're here, to cover a tech conference, and they write about the city of San Francisco, what do they write about?
They write about the cost of living.
Yep. And the homelessness and
I mean, the homelessness has been there since I was a kid.
Sure. But that's a part of it, right? So there's also this narrative idea by people that don't live here, and many that do, that we are the first wave, and the tech folk came like locusts, and they ate the entire city to the point where there is just, craziness in the streets and nobody can afford anything. And it's more expensive than New York City. And now they're in your town and they're Lyle Landley from The Simpsons singing about how great a monorail will be when to Springfield. And ultimately we are Brockway, Ogdenville, and North Haverbrook.
It's yeah, I mean it's
Amazon wants to take over your town.
Exactly. Amazon.
You know, and that's the thing. I mean, not to too far straight, but that's kind of the fear of investment in general, right? In cities like Sydney, Melbourne, Vancouver, you have a huge wave of real estate investment, which drives up the cost of everything as everyone uses real estate as kind of an investment vehicle, and people are being priced out of their home. I mean, a lot of the same issues, right? Being priced out of their home, working at a job that doesn't cover the cost of living, forcing people to move farther away. Even though the city hall and business people, this is great for business. Now we got more money coming in. It's one of those things that really, I think, requires not just strong leadership, but really kind of, a very broad vision of how these things should all tie in together, because there will be disruption for certain sectors for people, and you need to be ahead of the curve on a lot of that stuff, right? It's not just, give me the investment money, gimme. Like, is the Foxconn investment that Wisconsin is getting, that they shelled out $3 billion to get, is that going to really be in the long term a worthwhile investment? I mean, they're just assembling stuff. They're not going to be doing any of the fabbing that other Foxconn manufacturing plants do. So, I mean, it's a lot of things, and I think that's where the angst from people come from, is they're just getting mad at everything and everyone, and they're picking the closest thing to get mad at.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Thanks for watching. Thanks for supporting. And I hope you're not angry with us. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
We love you.